The Harkonnens have been stockpiling it for more than 20 years. They mean spice production to fail and you to be blamed. They wish the Atreides name to become unpopular. Think of the Landsraad houses that look to me for a certain amount of leadership. Their unofficial spokesman. Think how they'd react if I were responsible for serious reduction in their income. After all, one's own profits must come first. The Great Convention be damned. You can't let someone pauperize you. A harsh smile twisted the Duke's mouth. They'd look the other way, no matter what was done to me. Even if we were attacked with atomics? Nothing so flagrant. No open defiance of the convention, but almost anything else short of that. Perhaps even dusting a bit of soil poisoning. Then why are we walking into this? Paul, the Duke frowned at his son. Knowing there's a trap is... that is the first step in evading it. This is like single combat, son, only on a larger scale. A feint within a feint within a feint. Seemingly without end. The task is to unravel it. Knowing that the Harkonnens stockpile melange, we asked other questions. Who else is stockpiling? That's the list of our enemies. Who? Certain houses we know are unfriendly, and some we thought are friendly. We'd need to consider them for the most part, because there is one other much more important. Our beloved Padishah Emperor. Paul tried to swallow, and his throat suddenly dry. Couldn't you convene the Landsraad? Expose? Make our enemy aware we know which hand holds the knife? Oh, now, Paul, we see the knife now. Who knows where it might be shifted next? If we put this before the Landsraad, it will only create a great cloud of confusion. The Emperor would deny it. Who could gainsay him? All we'd gain is a little time, while risking chaos. And where would the next attack come from? All the houses might start stockpiling spice. Our enemies have a head start. Too much of a lead to overcome. The Emperor, Paul says. That means Sardaukar. Disguised in Harkonnen livery, no doubt, the Duke said. But the soldier fanatics nonetheless. How can the Fremen help us against Sardaukar? Did Huat tell you of Salsa Secundus? The Emperor's prison planet? No. What if it were more than a prison planet, Paul? There's a question you will never hear about the Imperial Corps of Sardaukar. Where did they come from? From the prison planet? They come from somewhere. But the supporting levies, the Emperor demands from what we are led to believe. They're just the Emperor's levies, trained young and superbly. You hear an occasional muttering of the Emperor's training cadres, but the balance of our civilization remains the same. The military forces of the Landsraad great houses on one side, the Sardaukar and their supporting levies on the other. And their supporting levies, Paul. The Sardaukar remain the Sardaukar. But every report on Salsa Secundus says it's a hell world. Undoubtedly. But if you were going to raise tough, strong, ferocious men, what environmental conditions would you impose upon them? How could you win the loyalty of such men? There are proven ways. Play on certain knowledge of their superiority, the mystique of secret covenant, the spirit decor of shared suffering. It can be done. And it has been done on many worlds and many times. Paul nodded. Holding his attention of his father's face, he felt some revelation impending. Consider Arrakis, the Duke said. When you get outside the towns and garrison village, it's every bit as terrible a place as Salsa Secundus. Paul's eyes went wide. The Fremen! We have there the potential of a corps as strong and as deadly as the Sardaukar. It'll require patience to exploit them secretly, and wealth to equip them properly, but Fremen are there, and the spice wealth is there. You see now why we walk into Arrakis, knowing that the trap is there? Don't the Harkonnens know about the Fremen? The Harkonnens have sneered at the Fremen, hunted them for sport, never even bothered trying to count them. We know the Harkonnen policy with planetary populations, spend as little as possible to maintain them. The metallic threads of the hawk symbol above his father's breast glittered as the Duke shifted position. You see now? We're negotiating with the Fremen right now, Paul said. I sent a mission, headed by Duncan Idaho, the Duke said. A proud and ruthless man, Duncan, but fond of the truth. I think the Fremen will hire him. Will admire him. If we're lucky, they may judge us by him. Duncan the Moral. Duncan the Moral, Paul said, and Gurney the Valorious. You name them well, the Duke said. And Paul thought Gurney, one of the Reverend Mother's Paul thought, Gurney's one of the Reverend Mother meant, a supporter of worlds, the valor of the brave. Gurney tells me you did well in weapons today, the Duke said. Well, that's not what he told me. The Duke laughed aloud. I figured Gurney would be sparse with his praise. He says you have a nicety of awareness, in his own words, or the differences between the blade's edge and its tip. Gurney says there's no artistry in killing with the tip, that it should be done with the edge. Gurney is a romantic, the Duke growled. The talk of killing suddenly disturbed him, coming from his son. I'd sooner you never had to kill. But, if the need arises, you do it however you can, tip or edge. He looked up at the skylight, on which the rain was drumming. Seeing the direction of his father's stare, Paul thought of all the wet skies out there, a thing never to be seen on Arrakis from all accounts. Then he thought of the skies. Yeah, it brought him to mind the space beyond. Are guild ships really big? The Duke looked at him. This will be your first time off planet, he said. Yes, they're big. We'll be riding in a Highliner because it's a long trip. A Highliner is truly big. Its holds will tuck all of our frigates and transports into a little corner. It will be just a small part of the ship's manifest. We won't be able to leave our frigates? That is part of the price you pay for guild security. There could be Harkonnen ships right alongside us, and we'd have nothing to fear from them. The Harkonnens know better than to endanger their shipping privileges. I'm going to watch our screens and try to get a look at a guildsman. No, you won't. Not even their agents know what a guildsman looks like. They never see them. The guilds is as jealous of its privacy as it is of its monopoly. Do not do anything to endanger our shipping privileges, Paul. Do you think they hide because they've mutated and don't look human anymore? Who knows, the Duke shrugs. It's a mystery we're not likely to solve. We have a more immediate problem. Among them, you. Me? Your mother wanted me to be the one to tell you this, son. You see, you may have mentat capabilities. Paul stared at his father, unable to speak for a moment. Then, a mentat? Me? But Watt agrees, son. It's true. But I thought mentat training had to start during infancy, and the subject couldn't be told of it because it might inhibit the early... He broke off, all his past circumstances coming into focus in one flashing computation. I see, he said. A day comes, the Duke said, when the potential mentat must learn what is being done. It may no longer be done to him. The mentat has to share with the choice of whether or not to continue or abandon the training. Some can continue, some are incapable of it. Only the potential mentat can tell for certain for himself. Paul rubbed his chin. All the special training from Hawat and his mother, the mnemonics, the focusing of awareness, the muscle control, all sharpening of sensitivities, the study of languages and nuances of voices, all of it clicked into a new kind of understanding in his mind. You'll be a duke someday, son, the father said. A mentat duke could be formidable indeed. Can you decide now, or do you need more time? There was no hesitation in his answer. I want to go on with the training. Formidable indeed, the Duke murmured, and Paul saw the proud smile on his father's face. The smile shocked Paul. It had a skull look on the Duke's narrow features. Paul closed his eyes, feeling the terrible purpose reawaken within him. Perhaps being a mentat is a terrible purpose, he thought. But even as he focused on this thought, his new awareness denied it. Alright, so that's it for that chapter. And no, I'm not double-fisting alcohol, ED. Double-fisting alcohol on an empty stomach is not a good idea. Alright, got another 30 minutes. Knock out maybe another chapter or two, depending on their size. This is actually my most favorite part of the book because it's really just world building, and I love the world that Herbert builds with this. Okay, So, next chapter. With the Lady Jessica and Arrakis, the Bene Gesserit system of sewing implant legends through the Missionaria Protectiva had come to its full fruition. The wisdom of seeding the known universe with a prophecy pattern for the protection of a Bene Gesserit personnel has long been appreciated, but never have we seen of a condition et extremis with more ideal mating of person and preparation. The prophetic legends have taken on Arrakis, even into the extent of adopted labels, including Reverend Mother, Canto, Respondo, and most of the Shari Law Panoplia Propheticus. It is generally accepted now that the Lady Jessica's latent abilities were grossly underestimated. All around the Lady Jessica, piled in corners of the Atreides' great hall, mounted on great spaces, stood the packaged freight of their lives. Boxes, trunks, cartons, cases, some partially unpacked. She could hear the cargo handlers from the guild's shuttle depositing another load in the entry. Jessica stood in the center of the hall. She moved in a slow turn, looking up and around at the shadowed carvings, crannies, and deep recessed windows. The giant anachronism of a room reminded her of the sisters' hall of the Bene Gesserit school. But the school had the effect of being warm. Here, all was bleak stone. Some architect had reached far back into history for those buttressed walls and great hangings, she thought. The arched ceiling stood 2 stories above her with great crossbeams. She felt sure they had been shipped here from Arrakis across the space at monstrous costs. No planet of this system grew trees to make such beams, unless the beams were imitation wood. She thought they were not. This had been the government mansion for the days of the old empire. Costs had been of less importance then, and it had been before the Harkonnens and their new megalopolis of Carthage, a cheap and brassy place some 200 kilometers northeast across the Broken Land. Leto had been wise to choose this place for the seat of his government. The name, Arrakeen, had a good sound, filled with tradition, and this was a smaller city, easier to sterilize and defend. Again there came the clatter of boxes being unloaded in the entry. Jessica sighed. Against a carton to her right stood the painting of the Duke's father. Wrapping twine hung around it like a frayed decoration. A piece of twine was still clutched in Jessica's left hand. Beside the painting lay a black bull's head mounted on polished board. The head was a dark island in a sea of wadded paper. Its plaque lay flat on the floor, and the bull's shiny muzzle pointed at the ceiling as though the beast were ready to bellow a challenge to the echoing room. Jessica wondered what compulsion had brought her to uncover those 2 things first, the head and the painting. She knew there was something symbolic in the action. Not since the day when the Duke's buyers had taken her from the school had she felt this frightened and unsure of herself. The head and the picture. They heightened her feelings of confusion. She shuddered, glanced at the slit windows high overhead. It was still early afternoon here, and in these latitudes the sky looked black and cold. So much darker than the warm blue of Caladan. A pang of homesickness throbbed through her. So far away, Caladan. Here we are. The voice was Duke Leto's. She whirled and saw him striding from the arched passage into the dining room hall. His black working uniform with red armorial crest was at the breast, looked dusty and rumpled. "I thought you might have lost yourself in this hideous place," he said. "It's a cold house," she said. She looked at his tallness, at the dark skin, wood-smoke gray of his eyes. But the face was predatory, thin, full of sharp angles and planes. A sudden fear of him tightened in her breast. He had become such a savage, driving person since the decision to bow to the Emperor's command. "The whole city feels cold." "It's a dirty, dusty little garrison town," he agreed. "But we'll change that." He looked around the hall. "These are public rooms for state occasions. I have just glanced at some of the family apartments in the south wing. They are much nicer." He stepped closer and touched her arms, admiring her stateliness. And again he wondered at her unknown ancestry. A renegade house, perhaps? Some black-barred royalty? She looked more regal than the Emperor's own blood. Under the pressure of his stare, she turned half away, exposing her profile, and he realized there was no single precise thing which brought her beauty into focus. The face was oval under a cap of hair the color of polished bronze. Her eyes were set wide, and green and clear as the morning skies of Caladan. Her nose was small, the mouth wide and generous. Her figure was good but scant, tall, with its curves gone to slimness. He remembered